In the chaos of a bustling ER, a young Indian woman stumbles in clutching her chest, gasping for air, but instead of help she's met with cold dismissal. Her pain mocked as overreaction. Her presence reduced to an inconvenience. Indian women tend to overreact. A nurse sneers as others are whisked to treatment while she's left to wait. Her vision fading, her dignity eroded. An hour later, her billionaire husband storms in, his voice slicing through the sterile hum. She's been here an hour. Why hasn't she been treated? What unfolds is a reckoning that shakes the hospital's core, exposing truths they hope to bury. Will justice prevail, or will silence win? Stay till the end to find out. Subscribe for our latest stories of courage and change, and share where you're listening from in the comments. Don't miss this. Every second counts. The emergency room of Rivergate Medical Center thrummed with a relentless pulse. Beeping monitors weaving a jagged melody, footsteps slapping linoleum, voices colliding in a sterile cacophony. Priya staggered through the sliding glass doors, her left hand pressed against her chest as if to hold her heart in place. Each breath clawed at her lungs, sharp and shallow, like shards of glass grinding deeper with every inhale. Her vision blurred at the edges, the fluorescent lights above smearing into halos. Sweat glistened on her golden brown skin, beating along her temple as she steadied herself against the check-in desk, her free hand gripping the counter's edge. "Please," she gasped, her voice fraying. "It's my chest. I can't breathe." The ER nurse behind the desk, a middle-aged woman with a name tag reading Cheryl, flicked her gaze up from her computer screen. Her eyes skimmed Priya, her simple gray blazer, her jet-black hair pulled into a neat ponytail, before dropping back to the monitor with a faint sigh. "Have a seat, ma'am," Cheryl said, her tone flat. "Mechanical. We'll call you when it's your turn." Priya's knees trembled, but she forced herself to stand taller, her voice straining through the pain. "It's bad. I'm dizzy. Please." Cheryl's lips pursed, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. "Ma'am, Indian women often overreact to pain. Let's stay calm, okay? Take a seat." The words landed like a slap, casual, yet cutting. Each syllable laced with a presumption Priya had heard too many times before. She swayed, clutching the desk tighter, but Cheryl had already turned away, typing with deliberate focus. As Priya turned toward the waiting room, the antiseptic scent and flickering fluorescent lights twisted her stomach. The scene was too familiar. The last time she'd walked into an ER like this, it was with her mother, chest heaving, dismissed by nurses who never looked past her brown skin. That night had never left her. She hadn't called it trauma then, just sleepless nights and a racing pulse at every hospital visit. But now, as her chest tightened and her hands began to shake, she knew. This wasn't just fear. This was the past breaking through. Across the crowded waiting room, a white woman in her 40s, clutching her forehead, shuffled in murmuring about lightheadedness. Within 2 minutes, a nurse with a clipboard ushered her through the triage doors, her steps brisk, her voice soothing. Priya blinked, disbelief mingling with the haze of pain. She lowered herself into a hard plastic chair, the cold surface biting through her slacks. Her pulse hammered in her ears, a frantic rhythm drowning out the ER's chaos. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she typed a quick message to her husband. "Raj, at ER. They're calling names. I'll update you." The waiting room was a mosaic of suffering, coughs, whimpers, the low hum of anxiety, but Priya felt invisible, her pain reduced to a footnote in the room's frenetic script. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing, but memories surged unbidden. Her mother, decades ago, clutching her chest in a different ER, was dismissed as anxious until it was too late. The weight of that loss pressed against Priya's ribs now, heavier than the pain itself. She was 31. A data strategist who'd clawed her way through tech firms and cultural bias to build a life of purpose. She'd mentored young South Asian women, taught them to navigate spaces that weren't built for them. Yet here in this sterile purgatory, she was just another name, not worth calling. A young nurse, her badge reading Nina, hovered near the desk, her brow furrowed as she glanced at Priya. She looked serious. Nina whispered to Cheryl, her voice barely audible over the din. "Should we check her vitals?" Cheryl waved a hand dismissively. "It's hysteria. We've seen this before. Let's handle the real ones first." Nina hesitated, her fingers twitching around her stethoscope, but she stepped back, her eyes lingering on Priya with a flicker of guilt. Time stretched, each minute a vice tightening around Priya's chest. Her vision dimmed further, the room tilting as she gripped the armrests. She'd faced dismissals before, project ideas ignored, credit given to others. But this was different. This wasn't about pride. It was about survival. Her phone buzzed faintly, Raj texting back, "On my way." But the words blurred as her head lulled, sweat soaking her collar. The glass doors hissed open again, and a new sound cut through the ER's clamor. The sharp, measured click of polished shoes. Raj Mehra crossed the threshold, his navy suit pristine, his presence a quiet storm. At 37, he carried the weight of a tech empire. His company, MedAccess, a leader in AI-driven healthcare platforms. As the primary donor to Rivergate's cardiac wing, he had funded the very monitors now ignoring his wife. His dark eyes scanned the room, expecting to find Priya in a treatment bay, her condition addressed. Instead, he saw her slumped in a corner chair, her face ashen, her breath shallow and ragged. Raj's stride didn't falter as he crossed the linoleum, the crowd parting instinctively. He reached the check-in desk, his voice low but edged with steel. "My wife's name is Priya Mehra. She's been here nearly an hour. Why hasn't anyone helped her?" Cheryl looked up, her earlier indifference replaced by a flash of annoyance. "Sir, we're doing our best. It's a busy ER night." Her tone implied he was just another impatient family member. But Raj's expression didn't shift. He reached into his coat, producing a sleek business card and sliding it across the counter. The text gleamed in the fluorescent light. Raj Mehra, CEO, MedAccess, primary donor, Rivergate Medical Center. Cheryl's face drained of color, her fingers freezing over the keyboard. I'll get the charge nurse," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. She scurried toward the triage doors, her clipboard clutched like a shield. Raj didn't watch her retreat. He knelt beside Priya, his hand warm against her clammy shoulder, his voice a soft anchor. "I'm here," he murmured. "You're not alone anymore." The ER's rhythm shifted, a ripple of urgency spreading from the desk. Dr. Shah, a wiry man with tired eyes, emerged from the triage area, calling for a stretcher. "Mrs. Mehra, we're taking you back now," he said, his tone clipped but focused. Nurses materialized, their movement swift as they wheeled Priya toward a treatment bay. An EKG was hooked up, its jagged lines flashing across the screen. Dr. Shah's brow furrowed as he scanned her chart. Family history of arrhythmia. This should have been flagged immediately. Why wasn't she triaged? Cheryl hovered at the edge of the bay, her face a mask of forced contrition. "Mr. Mehra, I'm deeply sorry." Raj turned his gaze, cutting through her words. "This wasn't an oversight. This was biased. You saw her skin before you saw her symptoms." His voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of a verdict, silencing the hum of the monitors. Priya, now hooked to an IV, her breathing steadied by oxygen, met his eyes. She didn't speak, but her hand tightened around his, a silent vow that this moment wouldn't be forgotten. The treatment bay in Rivergate Medical Center's emergency room was a stark cocoon of white curtains and cold steel, its air thick with antiseptic and urgency. Priya Mehra lay on a gurney, her chest still tight, but her breathing steadied by an oxygen mask. The EKG monitor beside her traced erratic peaks, a visual echo of the arrhythmia threatening her heart. Her eyes, heavy with exhaustion, darted to the flurry of nurses adjusting IV lines and whispering to Dr. Shah, whose furrowed brow betrayed his alarm. "Family history of arrhythmia," he muttered, flipping through Priya's chart on a tablet. "This should have been prioritized. How was this missed?" His question hung unanswered, a silent accusation in the sterile space. Priya's fingers curled around the thin hospital blanket, her mind clawing through the fog of pain. She wasn't just a patient. Now she was a case, a chart, a near miss. The memory of her mother's death, dismissed as anxiety in a similar ER decades ago, pulsed in her veins, sharper than the IV needle. She was 31, a woman who'd built a career shattering digital barriers. Yet here she was, reduced to a number on a screen, her survival hinging on a system that had already failed her once. Raj Mehra stood at her side, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the chaos. His hand rested lightly on hers, a steady anchor, but his eyes burned with a quiet fury. As CEO of MedAccess, he'd funded this hospital's cardiac wing, its gleaming monitors a testament to his vision for equitable care. Now those same monitors mocked him, their data exposing a truth he hadn't anticipated. His wife, Priya, had been left to languish because of her skin. I want answers, he said to Dr. Shah, his voice low, measured, but carrying the weight of a man who built empires. Why wasn't her chart flagged? Why was she left out? Dr. Shah, his scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift, sighed heavily. Triage is subjective. Sometimes nurses make calls based on presentation, vitals, and experience. But this, he gestured to the EKG, its lines jagged and urgent. This was critical. Someone should have acted. Priya shifted the oxygen mask, muffling her words but not her resolve. Someone didn't, she said, her voice soft but sharp. They saw me and decided I wasn't urgent. Across the bay, Nina, the young nurse who'd hesitated at the check-in desk, lingered near a crash cart, her hands fidgeting with a stethoscope. She'd seen Priya's distress, had whispered her concern to Cheryl, only to be dismissed. Now her eyes met Priya's, a flicker of guilt passing between them. Nina stepped forward, her voice tentative. "Mr. Mehra, I've seen this before," she said quietly. "Not just tonight. Minority patients, they wait longer. Sometimes their symptoms are downplayed. I didn't know how to push back." Raj's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You're pushing back now," he said. "That's a start." Priya's chest ached, but her mind sharpened, fueled by Nina's admission. She thought of the countless others who'd sat in that waiting room, their pain invisible, their voices unheard. She'd mentored young women, taught them to demand space in boardrooms, but this was a different battlefield, one where silence could kill. "How many?" she asked Nina, her tone steady despite the pain. "How many others were ignored, like me?" Nina's lips parted, but no words came. The answer was in her silence. Heavy and damning, Raj excused himself, his phone already in hand as he stepped into the corridor. He called his chief of staff, Layla, his voice clipped. "Pull the ER's triage logs from tonight. Cross-reference wait times by patient demographics. I want data by dawn." He paused, glancing back at Priya through the curtain's gap. "And get me the hospital's training records, every protocol, every session." Layla's response was swift. "On it. You're going after the system, aren't you?" Raj didn't hesitate. "It's already gone after my wife." Back in the bay, Priya closed her eyes, her mother's face flashing in her mind, her warm smile, her final gasp in a hospital bed far from home. The memory wasn't just grief, it was fuel. She'd survived tonight, but survival wasn't enough. She wanted accountability, a reckoning for every patient who'd been dismissed. "I'm not letting this go," she whispered to herself, her fingers tightening around Raj's empty chair. The EKG beeped steadily now, her heart stabilized, but her resolve was a different kind of pulse. Unyielding. Fierce. Raj returned, his expression unreadable, but his purpose clear. He met Dr. Shah at the foot of the gurney. "I'm meeting with Dr. Monroe, the hospital director, tonight," he said. "I want to know why triage decisions are left to discretion when that discretion buries people like my wife." Dr. Shah nodded, his face grim. "I'll pull the logs myself. There's a pattern here. I've suspected it for months." Priya lifted her oxygen mask slightly, her voice cutting through the hum of machines. "It's not just a pattern, it's a choice, and they chose wrong." In Dr. Monroe's office, a sterile cube overlooking the ER's flickering lights, Raj sat across from the hospital director. A woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and a practiced calm. "Mr. Mehra, we're horrified by what happened," Dr. Monroe began, her hands folded tightly. "But the ER is chaotic. Mistakes happen." Raj leaned forward, his voice like tempered steel. "This wasn't a mistake. It was biased. My wife's chart had a family history of arrhythmia, yet she waited an hour while others were seen in minutes. I want the triage protocols, training records, and wait time data. Now." Dr. Monroe hesitated, her composure faltering. "We'll cooperate, but let's keep this internal. The hospital's reputation." Raj cut her off. "The hospital's reputation is built on my wife's survival. You don't get to hide behind it." He slid a tablet across the desk, already open to a preliminary analysis from his team. South Asian patients waited an average of 47 minutes longer than white patients for triage, even with similar symptoms. Dr. Monroe's eyes widened, but she said nothing, the data speaking louder than her excuses. Back in the treatment bay, Priya removed the oxygen mask, her breathing steadier but her heart still racing with purpose. She looked at Nina, who lingered nearby, her hands no longer fidgeting but steady. "You said you've seen this before," Priya said softly. "Will you help us stop it?" Nina nodded, a spark of courage in her eyes. "Yes, I'm done staying quiet." Raj returned, his hand finding Priya's once more. "We're meeting the board tonight," he said, his voice a promise. "This ends now." Priya met his gaze, her resolve mirroring his. "It's not just about me," she said. "It's about everyone they've let wait." The EKG beeped on, a reminder of her survival, but the real fight was just beginning. A fight that would shake the hospital's foundations and demand a new standard for every heart still beating in the dark. The boardroom of Rivergate Medical Center perched high above the emergency room's frenetic pulse. Its floor-to-ceiling windows framed a city skyline that glittered with indifference. Inside, the air was heavy with polished oak and unspoken tension, the long table reflecting the glow of recessed lights like a still lake hiding currents beneath. Raj Mehra sat at the head, his charcoal suit absorbing the light, his posture deceptively relaxed. His eyes, however, were unrelenting, scanning the 6 board members before him, each a pillar of the hospital's legacy, now fidgeting under the weight of his gaze. Priya Mehra remained in her treatment bay below, her heart stabilized, but her spirit a fire that Raj carried into this room. He was here not just for her, but for every patient whose pain had been dismissed by the system he'd helped fund. Dr. Helen Monroe, the hospital director, sat to his left. Her silver hair pulled taut, her expression a careful mask of professionalism. Across the table, Dr. Richard Ligari, a silver-haired cardiologist with a lineage tied to old money, leaned back, his fingers steepled as if to anchor his authority. The other board members, executives and stakeholders, shifted in their leather chairs, their faces a mix of unease and calculation. Raj broke the silence, his voice low but resonant, like a storm gathering on the horizon. "Tonight, we address a failure," he said, sliding a tablet across the table. Its screen glowed with data, triage logs, wait times, and a damning 47-minute disparity for South Asian patients. "My wife Priya nearly died because this hospital chose bias over protocol." Dr. Monroe cleared her throat, her tone measured. "Mr. Mehra, we're reviewing the incident with utmost seriousness. But triage is complex. Nurses rely on judgment under pressure." Raj's eyes narrowed, a flicker of disdain crossing his face. Judgment that ignored a family history of arrhythmia in Priya's chart. Judgment that left her gasping for an hour while others were seen in minutes. That's not complexity. That's prejudice. He tapped the tablet, pulling up a time-stamped log. At 7:12 p.m., Priya Mehra's triage entry was marked low priority by Nurse Cheryl. "Explain that." Dr. Ligari leaned forward, his voice smooth but patronizing. "Raj, mistakes happen in high-pressure environments. Cheryl's been with us for years. She's built this ER's efficiency. Surely we can resolve this quietly to protect the hospital's reputation." Raj's jaw tightened, but his tone remained even. "The hospital's reputation is built on trust, Richard. You don't earn trust by burying a woman's pain because her skin doesn't match your definition of urgent." Priya's name lingered in the air, a reminder of the human cost behind the numbers. Flashbacks surged through Raj's mind as he spoke, moments that forged his resolve. Years ago, as a young Indian entrepreneur, he'd pitched AI solutions to skeptical tech boards, their smiles thin, their questions laced with doubt. He'd sworn to Priya he'd use his wealth to dismantle those barriers, to ensure no one else faced the erasure he'd endured. Now, in this boardroom, he saw the same subtle arrogance in Ligari's eyes, the same assumption that power could smooth over injustice. "This isn't about one nurse," Raj continued, his voice cutting through the room's stale air. "It's about a system that lets her make those calls unchecked. 17 cases in 6 months. Minority patients delayed, reassigned, or dismissed, all with Cheryl's override." A younger board member, Dr. Emily Chen, adjusted her glasses, her voice cautious. "The data is troubling, but proving intent is difficult. How do we know this wasn't just human error?" Raj's lips curved into a humorless smile. He swiped the tablet, revealing a digital trail. Cheryl's login, overriding Priya's triage entry at 7:12 p.m., flagged as non-urgent, despite chest pain. "This isn't an error," he said. "This is a choice, made with admin access. Only a senior nurse like Cheryl has that. Intent is in the pattern." The room fell silent, the weight of evidence pressing against their defenses. Dr. Monroe shifted, her hands clasped tightly. "We'll revise triage protocols, Mr. Mehra, but escalating this publicly could damage patient trust." Raj leaned forward, his voice ablade. "Patient trust was damaged when my wife Priya was left to suffer. You don't fix that with a memo. You fix it with accountability." He turned to the board. I'm funding an independent audit of every ER process, triage, training, staffing. If you resist, I will pull my funding, all $50 million of it. The threat landed like a thunderclap, chairs creaking as board members shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Ligari scoffed, his tone dripping with condescension. You're leveraging your wallet to force a witch hunt. Cheryl's a professional, not a villain. Raj's eyes locked onto his, unyielding. A professional who told Priya she was overreacting because of her race. If that's your standard, your standards are broken. Priya's name, spoken again, was a tether to the stakes. Her pain, her survival, her dignity. Raj's mind flashed to their late-night talks, her voice steady as she mentored young women, teaching them to demand respect. Now he was demanding due for her. The boardroom door opened and Cheryl entered, summoned to face the board. Her scrubs were crisp, but her face was pale, her hands clutching a clipboard like a lifeline. Mr. Mehra, she began, her voice trembling. I assure you there was no intent to harm. It was a busy night, a misjudgment. Raj didn't blink. A misjudgment that marked my wife's chest pain as hysteria. You saw her chart. You chose to ignore it. He held up the tablet, the triage log glowing accusingly. Your login, Cheryl. Your override. Explain why Priya's name was downgraded, while a white patient with a headache was seen in 2 minutes. Cheryl's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted to Dr. Ligari for support. He offered none, his gaze fixed on the table. I thought it was a standard call, she stammered. We prioritize based on presentation. Raj's voice dropped, cold and precise. You prioritized based on bias, and it nearly cost Priya her life. The room's silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. Dr. Monroe stood, her voice strained but resolute. We'll cooperate with the audit, Mr. Mehra, and we'll review Nurse Cheryl's conduct. Raj nodded, but his eyes remained on Ligari. This isn't just about one night. It's about a culture you've let fester. Fix it, or I'll dismantle it. He rose, the tablet tucked under his arm, his exit a quiet promise of consequences. As the door closed behind him, a board member's phone buzzed, a leaked audio clip from the meeting already in a journalist's inbox. The fight was no longer contained, and Priya's story, still unfolding below, was about to ignite a reckoning far beyond these walls. The dawn broke over Rivergate Medical Center with a pale, unforgiving light casting long shadows across the hospital's glass facade. Inside, Priya Mehra lay in her recovery room, the soft beep of a heart monitor a steady companion to her thoughts. Her chest still ached, a dull reminder of the arrhythmia that had nearly claimed her, but her mind was sharp, alive with purpose. The sterile walls, once a cage of dismissal, now felt like a stage where her story was unfolding. Her phone, propped on the bedside table, buzzed with notifications. News alerts, social media tags, a flood of voices echoing her pain. A headline blazed across the screen, Rivergate ER accused of racial bias in triage delays. The boardroom confrontation, recorded by an unseen ally, had leaked before sunrise, its audio rippling through the city's digital veins. Priya scrolled through the article, her breath catching at the transcript of Raj's voice, sharp and unyielding. You prioritized based on bias, and it nearly cost my wife her life. The words were a mirror to her experience, a validation of the hour she'd spent gasping in the waiting room, invisible to those meant to save her. She'd always been a private advocate, mentoring young South Asian women in quiet boardrooms. But now, her story was public, raw, unstoppable. Shahat Priya Protocol trended on social media, a hashtag born from strangers who'd read the leak and seen their pain reflected. I waited 2 hours with a broken arm, one post read. They said I was dramatic, wrote another. Priya's fingers trembled as she scrolled, each story a thread in a tapestry of shared injustice. In his downtown office, Raj Mehra paced before a wall of screens, his team analyzing data streams from the hospital's triage logs. The leaked audio had ignited a firestorm, and he was stoking it. His phone buzzed with a call from Dr. Richard Ligari, the board member whose condescension had grated in the boardroom. You've made your point, Ligari said, his voice smooth but edged with urgency. This public shaming risks the hospital's funding, its credibility. Let's contain it. Raj's response was ice cold. You contained my wife's pain for an hour, Richard. Now the world sees what you tried to hide. He hung up, his focus returning to the screens, where data revealed a stark truth. South Asian patients were systematically sidelined, Their wait times a silent indictment of the hospital's practices. Priya, propped against pillows, opened her laptop. She wasn't ready to speak publicly, not yet, but the weight of the stories flooding her inbox demanded a response. She began typing a blog post for her university's ethics forum, her words deliberate, searing. When you're left to wait in an ER, gasping for breath, it's not just time you lose, it's dignity, it's trust, it's the belief that you matter. She titled it Invisible in the ER, her fingers pausing over the keys as memories surged. Her mother's misdiagnosed heart condition, the way Priya had vowed to never let silence win again. This wasn't just her story, it was a call to those who'd been erased, a beacon for those still waiting. In the ER below, Nina, the young nurse who dared to speak up, stood at a supply closet, her hands steady but her heart racing. The leak had changed everything. Staff whispered in break rooms, some defensive, others relieved. Nina slipped into Priya's room during a quiet moment, her voice low. "Mrs. Mehra, I've seen it happen before. Patients like you overlooked. I stayed quiet too long. If you need me to testify, to share what I've seen, I will." Priya met her gaze, seeing not just guilt but resolve. "You're not just testifying for me," Priya said softly. "You're doing it for everyone who didn't make it out of that waiting room." Nina nodded, her jaw tight, a spark of courage igniting. Raj, meanwhile, stood before a conference call with his Med-Access team, directing them to release the triage data publicly. "No redactions," he instructed, his voice firm. "The hospital's statement is vague. Reviewing protocols, that's not enough. People need to see the numbers, by noon." The data hit the internet. 17 cases of minority patients delayed or dismissed, each time-stamped, each linked to senior staff overrides. The response was immediate. Activists shared infographics, journalists demanded interviews, and patients posted videos recounting their own ER dismissals. Priya read the posts from her bed, her heart swelling with a mix of grief and hope. She'd never wanted to be a symbol, but these voices made her pain feel less solitary. Dr. Monroe, the hospital director, issued a press release, a carefully worded promise to investigate disparities, but it rang hollow against the leaked audio's raw truth. In a private meeting, she called Raj, her voice strained. "We're cooperating, but this public exposure is chaos. Donors are pulling back." Raj's reply was unflinching. "Good. Let them pull back. We'll fund what matters, equity, not egos." He hung up, his mind already on Priya, who was drafting her blog's final lines. "Invisibility isn't an accident. It's a choice, and I choose to be seen." The blog post went live at noon, shared first by her university, then amplified by thousands. Priya protocols surged, a rallying cry for those who'd been dismissed, ignored, erased. Priya closed her laptop, her chest still tender but her spirit alight. She thought of her mentees, young women she'd coached to demand their place in a world that often refused them. Now she was doing the same, not in a boardroom but in a hospital bed, her words a weapon against silence. Downstairs, Nina faced a coworker's scowl in the break room. "You're stirring trouble," the nurse hissed. Nina straightened, her voice steady. "No, I'm ending it." She thought of Priya's eyes, the way they'd held her accountable, yet offered grace. Back in her room, Priya received a text from Raj. "Your post is everywhere. You're changing the game." She smiled faintly, her fingers tracing the IV line in her arm. This wasn't just about her survival. It was about rewriting the rules for everyone who'd been left waiting. As the sun climbed higher, a local news van parked outside the hospital, reporters clamoring for statements. The leaked audio played on repeat. Raj's voice, a clarion call, "You saw her skin before you saw her symptoms." The board scrambled, their closed-door denials now exposed to a city demanding answers. Priya, watching the coverage from her bed, felt the weight of her mother's memory lift slightly, replaced by a new resolve. She wasn't just a patient anymore. She was a catalyst, and as the hashtag trended higher, she knew the fight was far from over. A truth that would soon spill beyond these walls into a world ready to listen. The auditorium of Rivergate Medical Center buzzed with the restless hum of anticipation, its polished floors reflecting the glare of television lights. A week after the leaked audio turned Priya Mehra's ER ordeal into a national reckoning, she stood beside her husband Raj at a podium draped in the hospital's crest. Her navy dress hugged her frame, her curls loose and defiant. Her presence, a quiet command. Despite the lingering ache in her chest, the arrhythmia that had nearly claimed her was under control. But the fire in her eyes burned brighter than ever. Reporters, hospital staff, and community advocates filled the queued seats. Whispers, a tide of curiosity and expectation. Priya's blog post, Invisible in the ER, had ignited a movement, and now she was here to give it a name. Raj spoke first, his voice steady, resonant, cutting through the room's hum. This hospital saved my wife's life, but it almost took it first. Today, we launched the Mera Equity Initiative, $10 million to ensure no patient is dismissed because of their skin. He gestured to Priya, his eyes softening. This is her vision, her fight. Priya stepped forward, her hands steady on the podium, her gaze sweeping the crowd. I was invisible in that ER, she said, her voice clear, unyielding. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because someone decided I wasn't worth seeing. This initiative changes that, for everyone. The room erupted in applause, but Priya's expression remained resolute. Her thoughts were on the countless others whose stories echoed hers. The Mera Equity Initiative unveiled its cornerstone, the Priya Protocol, a mandate for immediate triage of critical symptoms like chest pain, backed by AI-driven monitoring to flag delays. Raj's tech firm, MedAccess, had developed the software. Its algorithms were designed to detect disparities in real time. Priya had insisted on transparency. Every triage decision logged, every wait time displayed on digital kiosks in the waiting room. No more shadows, she'd told Raj during late-night planning sessions. Her voice fierce despite her fatigue. She'd spent those nights in recovery, haunted by memories of her mother's misdiagnosed death. Each draft of the protocol, a vow to rewrite that history. In a hospital training room later that day, Nina, now a staff trainer, led the first dialogue session. Her Navy scrubs bore a new badge, Equitable Care for All. The room was packed with nurses, some skeptical, others weary, their faces a mosaic of resistance and hope. I've seen patients overlooked, Nina began, her voice steady despite the glares. I stayed silent once. Not anymore. She shared her own story. A South Asian nurse passed over for promotions, her concerns dismissed as overreacting. Her words cracked, the room's tension prompting a janitor to speak of ignored complaints, a nurse to admit to witnessing bias. Priya, watching from a live feed in her recovery room, felt a surge of pride. Nina wasn't just an ally. She was a bridge to a new culture. Outside, a rally swelled in the hospital's courtyard, organized by a coalition of patients inspired by Priya's blog. Signs read, "Every patient seen and triage fairness now, Priya Protocol." Their voices, a chorus demanding change. Priya watched from her window, her heart swelling with a mix of awe and responsibility. She'd never sought the spotlight. Her work mentoring young South Asian women had been quiet, deliberate. But this moment demanded her voice. She thought of her mentees, their dreams often dimmed by systems like the one that had failed her. "This is for them," she murmured, her breath fogging the glass. Inside the hospital, tension simmered. Cheryl and another nurse faced administrative leave pending investigation, their absence sparking murmurs among staff. In the break room, a senior nurse scoffed. "This training is just politics. We're too busy for this." Nina overheard, her jaw tightening. "It's not politics," she countered. "It's lives." The exchange reached Priya via text, and she smiled faintly, her fingers tracing the IV scar on her arm. She'd faced similar dismissals in corporate boardrooms, her ideas sidelined until a white colleague echoed them. This time, she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was dismantling the silence that buried others. Raj, meanwhile, fielded calls from his office, his team coordinating the initiative's rollout. Donors questioned the cost. Competitors whispered about overreach, but he remained unshaken. "This isn't charity," he told a skeptical board member. "It's accountability." He thought of Priya's resolve, the way she'd pushed through pain to draft the protocol, her notes scrawled in hospital margins. Their late-night talks had been raw, her fear of retaliation, his promise to protect her vision. "You're not alone in this," he'd said, and now he was proving it. His wealth, a tool to amplify her truth. The rally grew louder, chants echoing through the hospital's halls. Priya, now cleared to walk, joined Raj at the courtyard's edge. Her steps were slow but deliberate. A young woman approached, her eyes bright with gratitude. "I read your post," she said. "My sister waited in an ER last year. She didn't make it. Thank you for speaking." Priya's throat tightened, but she nodded. "We're changing it. For her, she said, her voice soft but firm. The crowd parted as she moved forward, her presence a quiet force, her recovery a testament to resilience. Back in her room, Priya sat with her laptop, the rally's energy still pulsing in her veins. She opened an email from a national healthcare coalition, inviting her to advise on equitable triage standards. The request stirred both pride and hesitation. She'd never wanted to be a symbol, only to survive. But the stories flooding her inbox, each a fragment of pain like hers, demanded action. She typed a reply accepting, her fingers steady. "This isn't the end," she told Raj, who stood by her side. "It's the beginning." He nodded, his hand on hers. "And we'll see it through." As the sun dipped below the skyline, the hospital's digital kiosks flickered to life, displaying real-time wait times, a promise of transparency. Priya watched from her window, her reflection a silhouette against the city's glow. She wasn't just a patient anymore. She was a catalyst, her pain a spark that had ignited a movement. But whispers of resistance lingered, staff grumbling, a rival hospital plotting to discredit the initiative. Priya knew the fight was far from won. And as the rally's chants faded, a new challenge loomed, ready to test the strength of her protocol and the resolve of those who carried it forward. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows of Rivergate Medical Center, casting golden streaks across the linoleum corridors. But the warmth did little to ease the chill of resistance brewing within. 2 weeks after the Mera Equity Initiative's launch, Priya Mera stood in her hospital recovery room, now a temporary command center, her laptop open to a stinging report from a rival hospital chain, Mercy General. The headline was calculated, Rivergate's bias claims statistically inconclusive, experts say. The report questioned the 47-minute triage disparity, dismissing it as anecdotal overreach. And its ripples were immediate. Local news ran skeptical segments, social media debates flared, and the momentum of Priya protocol wavered. Priya's jaw tightened as she read, her chest no longer aching from arrhythmia, but from the weight of a fight she'd never sought. She was 31, a woman who'd carved her place in marketing boardrooms, yet this public arena felt raw, exposing wounds she'd buried since her mother's death in a neglectful ER. The rival report wasn't just data, it was a deliberate erasure, a challenge to the truth she'd bled for. Priya closed her laptop, her reflection in the screen, a study in resolve. She'd faced pushback before, clients dismissing her pitches, colleagues stealing her ideas, but this was different. This was her life. Her pain weaponized to protect a system that thrived on silence. "They think they can bury us," she murmured, her voice steady, her fingers tracing the scar where her IV had been. In his downtown office, Raj Mehra stood before a digital dashboard, his team dissecting Mercy General's report. His navy blazer was unbuttoned, his sleeves rolled up, a rare informality betraying the urgency of the moment. MedAccess had cross-referenced regional ER data, revealing consistent disparities not just at Rivergate, but across Mercy's network. "They're deflecting," Raj told his analysts, his voice a low growl. "Push our findings to every outlet, no spin, just numbers." By evening, the counter-report hit the wires. Regional ERs show systemic triage bias. Data confirms. Infographics flooded social media, and TAC Priya protocol surged again, bolstered by patients sharing stories of delays in Mercy's own ERs. Raj's thoughts lingered on Priya, her quiet strength fueling his strategy. He'd promised her a world where no one waited as she had, and he'd burned through every resource to keep that vow. Priya sat on her hospital bed, a notepad in hand, sketching talking points for a national healthcare conference she'd been invited to address. The invitation thrilled her, but stirred doubt. She'd never been a public figure, only a mentor guiding young South Asian women through private battles. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, her final breath stolen by a system that saw her as expendable. Priya's pen paused, her heart racing with a familiar grief. "I can't let her down," she whispered, the words a prayer, a pledge. She texted Raj, "I'm doing the speech, but I'm scared." His reply was instant. "You're not alone. You never were." The words steadied her, a reminder of the man who'd knelt beside her in the ER, his presence a shield against the world's dismissals. At the hospital, Dr. Richard Ligari cornered Dr. Helen Monroe in her office, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights, his voice a hiss of frustration. "This initiative is bleeding us dry, Helen. Donors are spooked and Raj's public crusade is tanking our stock." Scale it back. Ligari's face darkened. Dr. Monroe, her silver-streaked hair pulled tight, leaned forward, her eyes sharp. The data doesn't lie, Richard. 17 cases of bias in 6 months. Here, under our watch. I'm backing Mara. Her shift from defender to reformer was cemented by the undeniable numbers. Priya's story had cracked her institutional loyalty, and the rival report only deepened her resolve. She thought of the rally, the patients chanting Priya's name, and knew retreat wasn't an option. In the ER break room, Nina faced a different kind of pushback. A colleague loyal to the sideline nurse Cheryl blocked her path, her voice low and venomous. "You're selling us out with this biased nonsense. Keep it up, and you'll be out of a job." Nina's heart pounded, but she stood taller, her badge, equitable care for all, a quiet defiance. "I'm not selling out," she said, her voice steady. "I'm saving lives." She thought of Priya's gaze, the way it had held her accountable, yet offered hope. Later, Nina texted Priya, "They're pushing back hard down here, but I'm not stopping." Priya's reply was swift, "Neither am I. Keep going." The exchange was a lifeline, binding them in a shared fight. Raj joined Priya in her room, his presence a calm amid the storm. They reviewed the conference speech, her words a blend of personal pain and universal truth. "You're not just speaking for yourself," Raj said, his hand brushing hers. "You're speaking for every patient who's been erased." Priya nodded, her fear ebbing, replaced by a fierce clarity. She'd faced dismissal her whole life. Boardrooms, classrooms, now hospitals. But this time, her voice would reshape the narrative. "They can't unsee us now," she said, her eyes meeting his, a spark of defiance igniting. The rival report's fallout continued, with Mercy General doubling down, their CEO dismissing the counter-data as manipulated. But the public wasn't swayed. Patient testimonials overwhelmed their denials, each story a brick in the wall Priya had begun to build. She watched the coverage from her bed, her laptop glowing with messages from strangers. "Your story saved my mom. I spoke up in the ER because of you." Each one was a balm, easing the scars of her ordeal. She thought of her mentees, their dreams often dimmed by systems like Mercy's, and knew her speech would be for them too. As night fell, Dr. Monroe met with the board, her voice firm. "We're not scaling back. The Priya protocol is working. Wait times are equalizing. We lead or we fall." Ligari stormed out, his influence waning, but the others nodded, swayed by data and public pressure. Priya, unaware of the meeting, sat with Raj rehearsing her speech. "I'm not just telling my story," she said, her voice soft but fierce. "I'm demanding they listen." Raj smiled, his pride unspoken but palpable. "They will." But as Priya saved her speech, her phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Stay silent or you'll regret it." Her breath caught, fear mingling with resolve. She showed Raj, who tensed, his protective instinct flaring. "They're scared," he said. "That means we're winning." Priya nodded, her jaw set. She'd survived an ER's neglect, a system's dismissal. She wouldn't bow to threats. The conference loomed, a stage for her truth, but the shadow of resistance grew darker, a test of her courage and the protocol that bore her name. The grand ballroom of the National Healthcare Conference in Washington, D.C. shimmered with the yawning weight of ambition, crystal chandeliers casting prisms across linen-draped tables, the hum of 1,000 voices blending with the clink of wine glasses. Priya Mehra stood backstage, her burgundy blazer tailored sharp, her curls framing a face that held both resolve and a flicker of nerves. A month after her near-fatal ER ordeal, she was here to deliver a keynote that could reshape the nation's triage systems. Her speech, "The Geography of Pain, Who Gets Seen in America's ERs," was a tapestry of her story and hard data, woven to challenge a system that had dismissed her pain. The anonymous threat, "Stay silent or you'll regret it," lingered like a shadow. But Priya's pulse steadied as she gripped her note cards, each word a defiance of fear. The stage lights flared and the MC's voice boomed, introducing her as Dr. Priya Mehra, advocate and catalyst for the Priya protocol. The applause was thunderous, but Priya felt the weight of expectation as she stepped into the spotlight. Her eyes scanned the crowd, hospital CEOs, policymakers, activists, some skeptical, others hopeful. She thought of her mother, whose heart had stopped in a neglectful ER, and of the letters from strangers, their stories of dismissal fueling her courage. "Good evening," Priya began, her voice clear, resonant, cutting through the room's murmur. I stood in an ER gasping for breath and was told to wait, not because my pain wasn't real, but because my skin marked me as less urgent. This isn't just my story. It's a systems failure. Her words flowed, a blend of raw memory and stark evidence. She recounted the hour she'd spent in Rivergate's waiting room, her chest pain labeled hysteria, while others were whisked to care. She cited the data Raj's team had unearthed: 17 cases of minority patients sidelined, their wait times a silent verdict on their worth. This is the geography of pain, Priya said, her gaze sweeping the audience, a map where race decides who gets seen. The room stilled, her voice a blade carving through complacency. She thought of her mentees, young South Asian women navigating worlds that diminished them, and channeled their resilience into every syllable. Back at Rivergate, the ER pulsed with a new rhythm. The Priya protocol had slashed racial disparities in wait times by 62%, its digital kiosks glowing with transparent data, staff badges proclaiming equitable care for all. Nina, now a staff trainer, watched Priya's live-streamed speech from the break room, where her colleagues gathered around a tablet. The room was tense. Some nurses resented the scrutiny, but others, inspired by Nina's dialogues, nodded as Priya spoke. "She's saying what we've seen," a young aide whispered, her voice thick with awe. Nina's chest swelled, her decision to testify for Priya a spark that had ignited this moment. She texted Priya, "You're changing everything. Keep going." Raj watched from the conference's front row, his presence a quiet anchor. He'd spent weeks rallying tech allies to scale the protocol's AI, his office a war room of code and conviction. Priya's strength, her refusal to bow to threats, had deepened his resolve. He thought of their late-night talks, her voice trembling as she read patient letters. "Your story made me demand a second opinion. I survived because of you." Now, as Priya's speech crescendoed, Raj's pride was palpable, his hand tightening around his phone, ready to counter any pushback from skeptics like Mercy General. On stage, Priya paused, her eyes locking with a hospital CEO in the third row, his arms crossed, his face a mask of doubt. "You might think this is one case, one hospital," she said, her tone sharp but measured, "but the data doesn't lie. Across America, Black patients wait longer, die sooner, because systems prioritize perception over pain." She clicked to a slide, a graph of triage delays, each spike a life at risk. The CEO shifted, his skepticism faltering. Priya felt a surge of clarity. She wasn't just speaking, she was dismantling, rebuilding, demanding a new map where no one was invisible. At Rivergate, the investigation into Nurse Cheryl concluded with her termination. Her override of Priya's triage entry was deemed deliberate. The news broke mid-speech, a notification flashing on attendees' phones. Whispers rippled through the ballroom, but Priya didn't flinch. She'd known accountability was coming. Cheryl's actions weren't isolated. They were a symptom of a culture that rewarded bias. "This isn't about punishment," she said, addressing the news without naming it. "It's about ensuring no patient waits because of who they are." The crowd erupted, some standing, others clapping, a wave of solidarity washing over her. But the victory was marred by Cheryl's response. A defamation lawsuit filed that morning, claiming she was scapegoated for systemic flaws. The news reached Nina via a colleague's text, her stomach twisting. She stepped into the ER corridor, where a digital kiosk displayed wait times, now equal across demographics, a testament to Priya's fight. Nina's resolve hardened. She'd testify against Cheryl, her voice no longer silenced by fear. She thought of Priya's gaze in the recovery room, its blend of challenge and grace, and knew she couldn't falter. Now Priya's speech ended with a call to action. Redraw the map, make every patient seen. The ovation was deafening, her words streaming live to millions. Priya protocol trending globally. Backstage, Raj met her, his embrace fierce. "You didn't just speak," he said, his voice low. "You shifted the axis." Priya's eyes glistened, not with tears but with purpose. She thought of her mother, her mentees, the strangers whose letters had carried her here. "It's not enough," she said, her voice soft but fierce. "Not until every ER changes." The speech's impact was immediate. Hospitals in 3 states contacted Raj's team, requesting the protocol's AI software. Social media buzzed with clips of Priya's closing lines, activists amplifying her call. But the lawsuit loomed. Cheryl's claims, a shadow threatening to discredit the initiative. Priya, scrolling through post-speech messages, saw one from a patient. "Your words made my doctor listen today." It was enough to silence the doubt, to fuel her for the battles ahead. As night fell, Priya and Raj stood outside the conference center, the city's pulse a distant hum. She clutched a letter from a young black girl, its words scrawled in crayon, "Thank you for being brave." Priya's throat tightened, her mother's memory a quiet presence. "They're listening," she said, her eyes on the horizon. Raj nodded, his hand in hers. "And they won't stop." But the lawsuit's shadow grew. A key witness's silence, a new threat testing the protocol's foundation, and Priya's unyielding resolve to remake a system that had once tried to erase her. The courtroom in downtown Rivergate was a crucible of muted tension, its high ceilings and oak-paneled walls absorbing the rustle of papers and the low hum of spectators. 2 months after Priya Mehra's keynote speech ignited a national movement, she sat at the witness stand, her navy suit crisp, her gaze steady despite the weight of Cheryl's defamation lawsuit. The former nurse claimed she'd been scapegoated for systemic flaws, her legal team painting Priya's ordeal as an isolated misstep, exaggerated for public gain. Outside, a community rally swelled, their chants, every patient seen, a faint pulse through the courtroom's thick walls. Priya's fingers rested on the stand, her heart calm but resolute. Each question from the opposing counsel was a chance to reclaim her truth. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed man with a practiced sneer, leaned forward. "Mrs. Mehra, isn't it true you amplified your story for personal fame?" Priya's voice cut through the room, clear and unflinching. "I amplified my story because I nearly died waiting for care. Fame didn't keep me alive. Truth did." Her words carried the weight of her night. The hour she'd gasped in a plastic chair, dismissed as hysterical. She thought of her mother, lost to similar neglect, and channeled that grief into clarity. "I spoke for every patient ignored because of their skin," she said, her eyes locking with the judge's. The room stilled, her testimony a beacon piercing the lawyer's calculated fog. At Rivergate Medical Center, Nina stood in the corridor, her tablet streaming the trial. Her role as a staff trainer had grown since Priya's speech, but today, her focus was on the testimony she'd provided, a sworn statement detailing Cheryl's pattern of bias, overrides on minority patients' triage entries, dismissive remarks in the break room. Other staff had followed, their courage sparked by Nina's dialogues and Priya's unyielding voice. A nurse beside her whispered, "She's fearless." Nina nodded, her badge equitable care for all, a quiet vow. She remembered Priya's recovery room, the way her gaze had urged her to speak. Now that truth was dismantling a system's lies. Raj Mehra sat in the courtroom's front row, his presence a silent bulwark. Behind the scenes, he'd rallied donors and tech partners to expand the Priya protocol, its AI now piloting in 5 hospitals. His office was a hub of innovation, but today his focus was on Priya. Her testimony echoed their late-night talks, her resolve forged in the letters from patients who'd survived because of her. He thought of a young girl's crayon note, "Thank you for being brave," framed in their home, a reminder of why they fought. When the lawyer pressed Priya, Raj's jaw tightened but her poise held, a testament to the woman who'd turned pain into power. Priya recounted the ER's dismissal, her voice steady but laced with controlled fury. "I was told black women overreact to pain. My chart showed a family history of arrhythmia, yet I waited an hour while others were seen in minutes." The judge, a woman with silver hair, leaned forward, her pen pausing. Priya's words weren't just testimony, they were a map of systemic failure, each detail a coordinate of injustice. She thought of her mentees, their dreams often dimmed by dismissal, and spoke for them too. "This isn't about one nurse," she said. "It's about a culture that let her erase me." Outside, the rally grew, patients and advocates hoisting signs. Priya Protocol. A young man shared his story of a delayed triage, his voice cracking over a megaphone. The crowd's energy seeped into the courtroom, a reminder of the stakes beyond these walls. Priya felt it, her testimony fueled by their voices, each one a thread in the tapestry she'd begun weaving. When the lawyer faltered, unable to counter her data, 17 cases of bias, time-stamped overrides, she knew the tide was turning. The judge's nod was subtle but telling, a crack in the system's armor. Back at the hospital, the ER's digital kiosks glowed with real-time wait times, a legacy of Priya's fight. A mural unveiled that morning, every patient seen, spanned the waiting room, its colors vibrant against the sterile white. Nurses wore their equity badges with pride. The protocol's 62% reduction in disparities a quiet triumph. Nina led a staff huddle, sharing Priya's testimony live. "This is why we change," she said, her voice firm. A once skeptical nurse nodded, her perspective shifted by the truth Priya had laid bare. Dr. Richard Langley, the board member who'd resisted reform, approached Raj during a recess, his voice low. "Settle this, Mira. Drop the public campaign, and we'll back your protocol. Quietly." Raj's eyes were still. "You don't get to bury my wife's truth for your comfort. This ends in accountability, not deals." Langley retreated, his influence eroded, a relic of a system Priya was dismantling. Raj returned to his seat, his hand brushing his phone, where a text from a tech ally confirmed, "Protocol adopted in Seattle ER, keep going." The trial's closing arguments loomed, but Priya's testimony had shifted the narrative. She stepped down, her steps measured, her presence a quiet command. The crowd outside roared as she emerged, their signs a sea of solidarity. A young woman pressed a letter into her hand. "Your voice saved my brother." Priya's throat tightened, but she smiled, her mother's memory a soft presence. "We're not done," she told Raj, who joined her, his arm around her shoulders. "Not until every ER sees us." As dusk settled, the courtroom emptied, but the rally's chants echoed, a promise of change. Priya stood with Raj, the city's skyline a backdrop to their shared resolve. The lawsuit's outcome was uncertain, but her truth had prevailed, a spark igniting a broader reckoning. A national regulator's announcement flashed on her phone, an industry-wide investigation into triage bias, inspired by her protocol. Priya's eyes met Raj's, her voice soft but fierce. "They can't unhear us now." The fight wasn't over, but the world was listening, and her story, etched in data, murals, and lives saved, was rewriting the rules of care. The late spring air carried a quiet promise as Priya stepped into the renovated cafeteria of Rivergate Medical Center. Its once sterile walls, now vibrant with community art and soft lighting. 3 months after her courtroom testimony turned the tide against systemic bias, Priya returned not as a patient, but as a beacon of change. Her emerald blouse caught the glow of a chandelier, her curls loose, her presence a quiet command. The cafeteria, transformed into a communal hub, bore a plaque honoring the Priya protocol. Its words etched in bronze, every patient seen. Priya's heart swelled. The memory of her ER ordeal, a gasping hour in a waiting room dismissed by bias, now a catalyst for a legacy that stretched beyond these walls. She paused at a mural, its colors depicting hands of every shade, linked in solidarity. A young nurse, her badge gleaming with equitable care for all, approached. "Mrs. Mehra, it's an honor," she said, her voice trembling. Priya smiled, her eyes warm. "The honor's mine. You're making this real." She thought of her mother, lost to a neglectful ER, and felt her spirit in this space, where transparency, digital kiosks flashing wait times had replaced silence. The protocol, now adopted by 12 hospitals nationwide, used Raj's AI to monitor triage disparities, ensuring no one waited as she had. Priya's fight, born in pain, was reshaping care across borders. At home that evening, Priya sat with Raj in their study, a framed printout of her ER triage confirmation on the desk, time-stamped, a relic of survival. She opened her laptop. Emails from her marketing firm glowed with updates on her mentees, young black women she'd guided through corporate battles. "They're thriving," she told Raj, her voice soft but proud. Her mentorship had always been her quiet rebellion, but now it carried the weight of her public stand. A flashback stirred, coaching a shy intern to demand credit for her ideas, the same fire Priya had summoned in the courtroom. "This is for them," she murmured, her fingers tracing the frame. Raj, his suit jacket draped over a chair, leaned back, his eyes on her. "Your protocol's open source now," he said. "Hospitals in Canada want it. You didn't just change Rivergate, you're rewriting the rules." His tech firm had released the AI software freely, a gift to a world stirred by Priya's voice. He thought of their late-night talks, her resilience despite threats, her speech that had sparked a movement. "You're the blueprint," he added, his hand finding hers. Priya's smile was faint but fierce. "We're the blueprint," she corrected, her gaze steady, a partnership forged in fire. At the hospital, Dr. Helen Carter, now a reform advocate, met with Priya to discuss a national training program. Her office, once a fortress of institutional caution, was lined with data charts showing the protocol's impact. Wait time disparities nearly eliminated, patient trust soaring. Your story forced us to see, Carter said, her silver-streaked hair catching the light. We're scaling this nationwide. Priya nodded, her mind on the rally that had followed her testimony, its chants of Priya protocol still echoing globally. It's not just training, she said, it's accountability. Her voice held the weight of her ER night, a vow to ensure no one else was erased. Outside, a final rally gathered patients and advocates, celebrating the protocol's success. A young woman shared her story of a swift triage, her life saved by the protocol's alerts. The crowd roared, signs proclaiming every patient seen. Priya watched from a balcony, her heart full. She'd never wanted to be a symbol, only to survive, but these voices made her pain a shared triumph. A child pressed a drawing into her hand, stick figures under a heart labeled "Thank you," and Priya's throat tightened. "For my mom," she whispered, her mother's memory a quiet guide. Later, at a national forum streamed globally, Priya spoke, her voice a clarion call. "This isn't about one ER or one patient," she said, her eyes sweeping the virtual audience. "It's about rewriting the rules so no one waits to breathe." Clips of her speech trended, every patient seen a global hashtag. Stories poured in from patients who demanded care and won. Priya stood tall, her burgundy blazer a nod to her keynote, her resolve unbroken. She thought of her mentees, their futures brighter because of this fight, and felt a quiet victory. Back at Rivergate, the ER hummed with purpose. Nina, now director of staff training, led a workshop. Her dialogues uncovered new voices, nurses, aides, patients who'd once stayed silent. A digital display showed zero disparity in wait times, a testament to Priya's legacy. "This is her work," Nina told her team, her voice thick with pride. She remembered Priya's recovery room, the gaze that had urged her to speak, and carried it forward, a torch for change. At home, Priya and Raj stood on their balcony, the city's skyline a canvas of possibility. She held a folder, proposals to expand the protocol to clinics, schools, and prisons. "It's starting," Raj said, his voice warm. "They want your blueprint." Priya looked at the stars, her mother's memory a soft light. "Then let's give it to them," she said, her voice fierce. "But they need to know, it's not about systems, it's about courage." As the night deepened, Rivergate's cafeteria glowed, a space where patients, staff, and community dined together. No one invisible. Priya's legacy wasn't just the protocol, it was the promise etched in every badge, every screen, every life saved. She'd stood in an ER, gasping, dismissed, but now her name was a revolution. A map redrawn. A world where no one waited to breathe. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey through the Priya Protocol, a story of resilience, justice, and transformation. Priya Mehra's fight against systemic bias in the ER reminds us that one voice can redraw the map of care, ensuring no one is left unseen. We're grateful for your time and hope her story moved you as much as it did us. What did you feel? Did it spark memories or questions about fairness in healthcare? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know where you're listening from. Your voice matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to catch our next story, where courage meets change in unexpected ways. Until then, stay brave, stay kind, and never doubt the power of standing up for what's right. See you soon for another tale that just might shift your perspective.